Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for our Cyber Defenders webinar. We're going to give everyone another minute or two to join and then we'll get started. Thanks. Okay everyone, thanks for waiting. My name is Riley from CB Insights and I'll be walking you through a few housekeeping items before turning it over to William for the presentation. First, don't worry about taking notes as we'll be sending both the slides and the recording to you right after the webinar. Second, if you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, your best bet is to reach out to the Citrix Help Desk. You can also tweet at us or send an email to webinar@cbinsights.com and we'll do our best to help. But again, don't worry, we'll be sending everything out afterwards. Okay, so as with all of our webinars, we'll be moving through a lot of data and insights and doing it pretty quickly. But we want to make sure we're answering your questions and keeping things relevant. So feel free to ask us questions using the questions tab within GoToWebinar or via Twitter using the hashtag CyberDefenders. William will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so feel free to stick around for that. Okay, a little bit on CB Insights. We're a data science and machine learning organization backed by Pilot Growth Equity and the National Science Foundation. We track every private company in the world and all of the financing and investment activity related to them to help our clients answer questions about major trends, competitor strategy, potential disruptors, and much more. Here you can see a few of our happy customers. Okay, so a little bit about Will. Will is a tech industry analyst here at CB Insights. He focuses on cybersecurity and macro venture capital trends. His research has been published in the New York Times, CNN, Bloomberg, and more, and he previously worked as an associate in the WAMDA Research Lab in Jordan and Beirut, Lebanon. He's a graduate of Denison University, and I'm going to turn it off to him for the presentation.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Riley. So, Cyber Defenders, what are we going to look at today? I'll give you a little bit of a high-level overview of where we're headed, and then we'll dive right in. So to start, we're going to look at some funding trends in the cybersecurity space. This is going to give us a little bit of context about, where this industry's been, and maybe help us understand a little bit more about where it's headed. Next up, we're going to look at the different categories that we've chosen for this year's Cyber Defender report. Then we're going to look at the actual companies that we've selected, 2017's Cyber Defenders. Then we're going to dive right into our categories and we're going to profile the specific companies in those categories. We're going to start with quantum encryption. We're going to work our way through things like IoT security, that's the Internet of Things, mobile security, securing your smartphones and your mobile devices, automobile security. We're going to finish up with cyber insurance. I'm going to give you guys a little bit more data about the companies that we'll talk about today, and then we're going to end with talking a little bit about the methodology in this report, how we selected the companies. So let's get right in. First, I'm going to start with two pretty simple ideas. The first one is that the global cyber threat landscape is large, complex, and varied. Essentially, we're facing a lot of different threats, a lot of different kinds of threats, and that poses a big problem for people who are looking for solutions. And investors and venture capitalists in particular are seizing the opportunity to find, the next generation of solutions in cybersecurity to solve that problem. So I'll draw your attention here to a quote by Donald R. Dixon. And Donald's a co-founder and a managing director of Trident Capital Cybersecurity. Now, Trident Capital Cybersecurity is a spin-off of Trident Capital, and it's a fund that recently closed at $300 million to focus specifically on early-stage cybersecurity companies. And what Donald's essentially saying here is that hackers are already inside the perimeter of some of our most sensitive, or some of our companies that house our most sensitive data. So the risk isn't just notional anymore, it's tangible. So it's no longer a choice for these enterprises of, do I act, but rather, how do I act and which solution do I use? Now, from 2012 to 2016, VCs put roughly $12.5 billion into this industry across over 1,200 deals. Now, if we break that out on an annual basis, we see two things that are very interesting. The first is that, the last 3 years running, we've seen over 270 deals to VC-backed cybersecurity companies. And what's interesting here is that in 2016, the broader venture capital industry saw a slowdown in terms of dollars and deals deployed, but cybersecurity seemed to be a bit immune to that as the number of deals actually was up from 2015. Now here we can see the share of deals in cybersecurity across the years 2012 through 2016. And what's most interesting here is that the seed and Series A deals take over 50% of the share of deals each year over that time period. And the Series A deals actually took a larger share over the time period to about 30% of all the deals in cybersecurity in 2016. Now here we can see who our private market leaders are. These are the unicorns in cybersecurity, or the companies that are currently valued at $1 billion or more. And there's 8 cybersecurity unicorns right now. I'll just talk briefly about 4 of these companies. Tanium, which is valued at $3.5 billion, is the most valuable private cybersecurity company in the world. The company Okta, you can see it's second on this list, recently filed for an IPO. Avast Software is actually the only cybersecurity unicorn that's located outside the US. It's in the Czech Republic. And then Cylance, second to last year, is the only new cybersecurity unicorn to emerge in 2016. Now, we won't really be talking more about these companies today, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but just keep in mind that there are 8 unicorns in the industry as of today. Now, this is an important trend to note in cybersecurity, and it's something that's going to really color our conversation throughout this webinar. And it's that cybersecurity and AI and machine learning as a subset of artificial intelligence is on the rise, with applications across the cybersecurity industry and with the potential to help address industry-wide challenges. AI is currently enjoying this wave of attention. It's actually a new paradigm shift in cybersecurity. So we'll talk more about that as we go. Just note that this is one of the biggest trends happening right now. And the way we got this data is through CB Insight's trends analysis tool, where we're mining a massive corpus of media articles. And this gives us the ability to, use data to give a real-time method to discover and predict sort of the rising expectations across technology industries. Now, what makes a cyber defender? Our selected startups are these early to mid-stage high momentum companies, and they're pioneering technology with the potential to transform the cybersecurity industry. Now, like I said, the unicorn companies, those 8 companies that are valued at $1 billion or more, are actually excluded from this analysis. We're really focused on those early to mid-stage high momentum companies. Also, companies that have raised past the Series C stage are not included, and companies that haven't raised funding since 2016 are also excluded from this entire report. So here we go. We'll look right now at our cyber defender categories. We're going to start with quantum encryption, and this is essentially the future of secure digital communications. Next up, we'll look at predictive intelligence. And these tools help us identify threats early, and they help prevent attacks. Next up, we'll look at deception security. These startups are actually turning the tables on hackers by deceiving them. We'll look at autonomous systems, and autonomous systems involve software that automatically executes security protocols. Then we'll move into IoT security. This is securing the internet-connected devices that we interact with every day. We'll then look at mobile security, which is essentially securing smartphones, but we'll focus mostly on the mobile workforce. Automobile security, this is an emerging category here, and these startups are developing security for the future of connected vehicles. We'll then look at critical infrastructure security. This is essentially cybersecurity for industrial control systems, and we'll talk a little bit about more what that means later. Finally, we're going to close out with cyber insurance, and these startups are developing tools to help insurance companies quantify cyber risk and then size premiums. So, without further ado, these are 2017's cyber defenders. Now, we're going to dive into each one of these companies individually, but I'll just call your attention initially to the predictive intelligence and autonomous systems categories. You'll know that there's slightly more startups in those areas. Again, remember the trends tool and the analysis we did to plot the arc of AI and machine learning in cybersecurity and how it was ticking up into the right, and we're seeing more and more interest and activity there. Well, those startups that are capitalizing on that technology are primarily concentrated in predictive intelligence and autonomous systems, though that isn't the only place where we're going to see them. So that's why we see a few more there. There's a lot of things to talk about, really. Next up, we're looking here at a geographic distribution of the cyber defenders for 2017. Now, note 70% of these companies are located in the US, and that's mostly in California and Massachusetts. And the next highest concentration of the cyber defenders are in Israel, followed by Switzerland, the UK, Australia, and Japan. Now, something that's very important to note here, while it looks from this map like the majority of these companies are concentrated in the US, quite a few of them have actually come from Israel, whether that's from Israel's special defense forces, which are a very active ecosystem for coming up with cybersecurity startups, or really just coming from there in general, and then they set up shop in the US for one reason or another. So we'll talk a little bit more about those companies as we go in. So here we have a nice little infographic here displaying the different categories and the different startups we're going to talk about. Now again, we're talking about 9 different trends and 30 startups with the potential to shape the future of cybersecurity. So here we go. We're going to start out right now with quantum encryption. And this is essentially the science of exploiting quantum mechanics for cryptography. And really the best known type of quantum encryption is what's called quantum key distribution. It's often called quantum cryptography, so relatively interchangeable. Essentially, this allows companies and governments to encrypt their data on networks in a quantum-safe manner. Now, unlike much of today's encryption solutions, which are vulnerable to the advent of quantum computing, QKD is based on quantum mechanics principles, which actually affords the entities that use it a long-term data protection plan when we will eventually get into the era of quantum computing. So our first cyber defender that we're going to talk about today is Quintessence Labs. That's a company out of Australia. They actually have funding here, you can see, from the Department of Defense of Australia. And they also have entered into 2 corporate minority deals with Westpac Group, one in 2015, and then a second corporate minority recently this year in 2017. Now, Westpac Group is one of the largest banks in Australia. The 2 companies have actually worked closely together to develop cybersecurity solutions that are tailored to the needs of the financial industry, improving their security, ensuring compliance with internal and regulatory requirements, and essentially cutting down the time and costs that are associated with encrypting sensitive data. Next up, we're looking at ID Quantique. Now, ID Quantique offers a few different products. They offer a product called Cerebus, that's a QKD server, and they also offer what's called a quantum random number generator that's used to generate high-quality encryption keys for security applications, but also in applications like gaming industries and mathematical simulations. And the combination of QKD and the quantum random number generators is a very powerful force when thinking about how to secure communications in the age of quantum computing. You can see here that they have investment from two investors. Q-Wave is actually a Canadian fund that's dedicated solely to funding early stage companies in quantum mechanics and material sciences. And then SK Telecom here is South Korean telecom company. And that investment by SK Telecom, or rather a corporate minority deal in 2016, is indicating that, you know, these quantum technologies are, if not now, are soon to be ready for large scale commercial deployments. Next up, we're looking at a company out of the UK called Post Quantum. They offer several products: PQ Check, which is essentially an authentication app; the PQ Share, which is a secure file sharing app; and PQ Guard, which is actually the underlying encryption engine that's used in the firm's software. Essentially, the software here works by breaking a master decryption key into parts and then distributing these parts. For instance, one might go to a financial firm's customer, while the other might go to a regulator. And a certain minimum number of these key fragments was then be brought back together to unlock the file. And this actually prevents insiders from abusing access privileges, stealing, tampering with information, those sorts of things. Post Quantum has also developed a distributed ledger record keeping system, or blockchain. This is really similar to the tech that underpins the digital currency Bitcoin. Now, financial firms are increasingly interested in using blockchains for clearing transactions and, providing audit trails and things like that. Post Quantum's actually has a partnership that was announced last year with a group called IP Systems Inc. And it's a New Jersey-based company that builds communication networks for trading firms and financial markets. Now we're on to our second Cyber Defenders category, and that's predictive intelligence. These startups offer products that are capable of parsing various data feeds about cyber activity in the wild. And what I mean by in the wild here is outside of the organization's network. These are data feeds that come from other organizations that monitor cyber activity, as well as maybe the company's proprietary data feed about what's happening in the deep and dark web, etc. We'll talk more about that. So they take those data feeds and then correlate them with behavioral data, which is what's happening inside an organization's network. And then the combination of those two data feeds, combined with some very powerful machine learning technology in most cases, can actually give analysts actionable information that can help them thwart an impending attack. Now, it's very important to call your attention here to a quote by Terry Halverson. He's the recently retired Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Defense. And essentially what Terry is saying here is that, is this technology going to help us predict every attack? No, but we're going to get better at predicting the trends and the threats so that we're actually ahead of the game. And that's what's important right now. So first company here in predictive intelligence is 4IQ. And 4IQ fuses surface, social, deep, and dark web sources so that security analysts can then investigate topics, different targets. They can research relationships, collaborate on cases, and assess risks to people, the physical infrastructure that they're monitoring, intellectual property, and even a brand or a reputation of a company. Unlike companies that focus on technical risk inside the company's network, which we will talk about, 4IQ is mostly focused on business risks that come from beyond this corporate network, especially in underground communities. I'll draw your attention to the lower right diagram here. You can see, they're monitoring everything from the web and social media, your Facebook account, Google searches, things that are readily available, all the way down to black markets and dark web accounts where oftentimes stolen credentials are traded. Next up, we're going to look at a company called FortScale. Now, FortScale has developed some software that analyzes the behavior of employees and entities inside the enterprise. So this is inside the network, right? That includes contractors, partners, and even the devices that these people act on. Basically, they're determining if anything's suspicious that needs a further investigation. They're using machine learning techniques that are applied to data that's collected from security incident and event management systems, different logs that build profiles of a typical user behavior. And then these profiles are used to create what's called a baseline. And these individual baselines are essentially used for flagging anomalies when something doesn't fit that baseline, but also, and this is crucial, for avoiding what's called a false positive. Essentially, you don't want to disrupt someone's behavior if it's actually benign but gets flagged by the system. So this company can do that. Next up, we're looking at a company called Anomaly. And Anomaly does something very similar. They're correlating these outside of the enterprise network, data feeds with behavioral analysis inside of the network to then come up with, actionable information for security analysts. They've got some heavy hitter investors behind them: Google Ventures, General Catalyst Partners, and In-Q-Tel. And In-Q-Tel, as you might know, is the VC arm of the U.S. intelligence community. So pretty powerful backers there. SentinelOne, we'll talk about now. That's another predictive intelligence company. Interestingly, SentinelOne has established a partnership with Time Inc. To protect the thousands or tens of thousands of endpoints that were previously protected in most organizations like Time by traditional antivirus software. They've also got a strategic North American distribution deal with a group called Avnet Inc. It's one of the world's largest IT technology distributors. So, when you look at those different partnerships and you look at what SentinelOne is focusing on, you can tell this is a company that's poised to succeed. They've got the partnerships, also addressing a large area of cybersecurity where there's a lot of vulnerability for a lot of organizations. That's the endpoint. The endpoint is your mobile devices, your laptops, the things that connect to the network. They actually just raised $70 million in a Series C round this year. You can see that at the bottom of the slide here. So next up, we're going to enter my favorite cyber defender category. This is called deception security. And these startups, again, are essentially turning the tables on the hackers. They offer cybersecurity systems that deploy decoy assets inside a network that serve as bait for attackers, essentially to identify the attack, to track it as it happens, and then ultimately to disrupt those security threats before they do damage. So one company we'll talk about first is Acalvio Technologies. And this company is recently emerged from stealth mode. And there isn't a whole lot to be said about them other than that they're pioneering some technology to go against advanced threats and the malicious activity that happens inside the security perimeter. Next up, we're looking at a company called TrapX, and TrapX is interesting. They have a unique way of mapping out the anatomy of an attack, or what can also be called the attacker's kill chain. They know how an attacker is going to get inside the system, what they're going to look for first, second, third, and ultimately, if they're looking for something to exfiltrate, how they're going to get that out. So what TrapX can actually do is offer deception tokens, or what are essentially lures. They appear in a network as an ordinary file, a script, a database, etc., and they're embedded with real IT assets. However, they're fake, and they bait attackers, and they divert them away from the stuff that can actually inflict damage. Next up, we're looking at a company called Elusive Networks. Elusive Networks here recently raised, you can see, a Series C round in 2017. So that actually brings the total raised by this startup to over 30 million. They've picked up $22 million in 2015 in a round led by NEA. Other investors include Cisco as a strategic backer, Innovation Endeavors, Bessemer Venture Partners, City Ventures, Marker, and Team8. Team8 is actually a security incubator that was founded by alums of the Israeli Defense Forces that spawned this company here. Now, Elusive Networks, as a concept here, pretty much accepts that hackers are going to find a way inside your network. This company doesn't deal in firewalls or anything that's going to keep out an attacker, full stop. Instead, it creates an alternate, false version of a company's network to then trap those hackers inside this false network, kind of like a rat in a maze. Now, next up, we're going to look at autonomous systems. And remember, this is one of the largest categories, or actually is the largest category in the cyber defenders this year, because a lot of these companies are focused on using machine learning technology or other forms of AI that are really hot right now in this industry. So these companies offer software that utilizes these advanced algorithms to instantaneously flag and respond to security threats. And that's either free of or in tandem with human analysts. But a note on that, and I'll draw your attention here to a quote by Golan Ben-Oni, and he's the CIO at IDT Corporation. That's a large telecommunications company. And basically what he's saying is that this software, these autonomous systems, and this software that they're offering is never going to replace human analysts, wholly. What ends up happening is just that analysts get their time freed up a little bit more to focus on what's actually a threat or what actually matters. So with that being said, we'll start here with the company Sif Science, and Sif Science is focused on anti-fraud solutions. Basically, the tool that they offer uses machine learning and behavioral analysis to detect fraudulent logins. Now, billions of users interact with online businesses every day. They browse websites, they make purchases, they post content, tons of other stuff. Now, all these digital signals from these interactions, including the information that's entered to sign up, for these interactions, sign up forms, logins, etc., can then be analyzed to indicate how risky a certain user is for an online business. Sif Science captures those signals, and then they can detect the patterns that indicate whether or not a user's good and trustworthy, or whether or not they're a fraudster out to fake their identity and steal things, commit acts of spam posts, or even credit card fraud, etc. The tool that they have then assigns a score for people that are interacting with a customer's site, and that score basically indicates whether or not the user's risky or not risky. This next company, PhishMe. PhishMe is actually targeting a very specific threat in cybersecurity, one that's often responsible for a lot of the credential thefts or login material thefts that we see. It's called phishing. It's a social engineering tactic whereby a hacker sends you or person basically a fake login portal. For example, I think the best known example of this recently is when John Podesta, was sent a fake login for Google. He put in his password and stuff, and then the DNC got hacked. I mean, this is essentially the same thing, but it has a number of different ways of materializing, a phishing attack. Essentially, PhishMe does that. They target this, and then the PhishMe Triage platform is a phishing-specific incident response platform. It allows analysts to automate the prioritization, analysis, and response to these specific phishing threats. Next up, we have ProtectWise, and ProtectWise is essentially a cloud network DVR. It's a recording of everything that's happening on your network, so that you can go back and replay what's happening on the network. It can take that historical data and correlate it and find these threats in real time, and then it automatically replays that stored data, so you can go back and find even unknown threats. Next company we'll look at is Exabeam. And Exabeam is doing something that a lot of the cyber defenders are, but they really call it out in their marketing. So we chose to really talk about it here with this company. It's called User Behavior Analytics. And essentially what this is you're establishing a baseline of activity for the users on a network and the entire network as a whole. And when that baseline is deviated from, you flag the anomaly, you can go in and you can fix what's potentially needed there. And that's all automated. That's why we included this company here. Next up, we have really one of the most hyped and hottest startups in cybersecurity today. This is Darktrace, and Darktrace is also using that behavioral analytics using machine learning, etc. Essentially, this company is at the forefront of providing what they call an enterprise immune system. So they're moving beyond the idea that we need to build walls and put locks on doors to keep hackers out, and instead we're going to create a system that recognizes when it's getting attacked and can fight back and essentially try to heal itself. It was a company that was created by mathematicians from the University of Cambridge. Next up, we're going to look at IoT security. And these are startups that offer products and services that authenticate IoT devices, and they encrypt data that's transmitted throughout IoT systems as well as industrial internet networks. So here I'll draw your attention to a quote by Chris Young, and Chris Young is the general manager of the Intel Security Group. And basically what Chris is saying here is that as we bring more of these devices into our lives, even as we connect our bodies to them, as they proliferate, we're going to see the number of attacks on them go up exponentially. So the first company we're talking about here is BioWatch. This is a secure authentication company for the IoT. Essentially what they offer is a smart watch. It's a wearable, but it's a biometric recognition system. And it takes an image of the pattern of the veins in your wrist, and then you can basically use that pattern to securely log into an e-commerce platform, to receive a package, to enter a kiosk in a building, to open your smart car, a lot of different use cases for this. But it's definitely going to be something that is worth keeping an eye on as we, integrate internet connected systems more and more into our lives. We're going to need a way to prove that we're the people who should be accessing those. So BioWatch is one startup to watch in that area. They just raised a seed VC round in 2017. Next up, we're looking at Rubicon Labs. Rubicon's choice here of what's called symmetric cryptography allows identity access for an IoT device to be done at a very low power and high speed ratio. And that's critical for securing the IoT. Why? Because historically IoT devices don't have a ton of computing power in them, and what computing power they do have is generally consumed by their primary function. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for securing them. So Rubicon Labs offers a cloud-based solution that can then authenticate in the cloud and beam down these keys to your device, authenticating them. Very powerful stuff here. This next company is pronounced Auth0. Now, for many website and mobile app developers, integrating with different login systems can turn into a big hassle. It also creates a number of security risks. So this company is helping those developers manage identity and authentication. Now, whether that's through social logins like Facebook and Twitter or through enterprise authentication systems, depends on the use case. And that's Auth0. Now here we're looking at CB Insights Trends tool again. And then this is essentially plotting the arc of IoT and cybersecurity in the media. And as you can see, since 2014, it's been mentioned more and more and more. It often corresponds, a little spike here post 2016, when different attacks happen using the IoT. It's currently enjoying a wave of attention across cybersecurity. Now I'll take a little natural break here and like to welcome anyone who's joined us in the middle of the webinar today. And I'll just, say, we want to, get together and link up with you on Twitter. So find us with the hashtag CyberDefenders. Next up, we're looking at mobile security. These companies are helping to ensure the privacy, the reliability, and the accessibility of the information that our mobile devices access, store, and process. So the first company in that category is AppThority. Now, enterprises are increasingly vulnerable to attacks, and one of the biggest attack vectors against those enterprises is the mobile applications they use. And AppThority is targeting that problem by grading risky behavior within the app, and they can do that by both tracking known and unknown malware. Next up, we're looking at Zimperium. Now, Zimperium, again, is taking that immune system approach where they're monitoring the behavior of the device, the user on the device. They're establishing a baseline. They're flagging the anomalies that can then be analyzed as a potential security threat. And if it is, they take action against that. This company raised some money recently in 2017, about $15 million. Now, the next company in mobile security that we're going to look at is SkyCure. Now, SkyCure is interesting. It uses a crowdsourced mobile threat intelligence engine that has the ability to anticipate zero-day threats, and it also offers visibility into millions of legitimate and malicious apps and benign and suspicious networks. The company has actually partnered with AT&T to secure millions of the company's enterprise customers. It also has partnership with a group called SoftChoice, which manages technology needs of thousands of corporate and public sector organizations across the U.S. and Canada. And then SkyCure's threat analysis service was actually recently integrated with the Microsoft Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. This is another company that's actually split about 60-40 between Israel and the U.S. Now we're going to take a look at automotive security. And these companies are essentially, building solutions to secure the future of connected vehicles and vehicles that will be more connected as that technology develops. I'll draw your attention here to a quote by Jeff Massimilla. And Jeff's the Chief Product Cybersecurity Officer at General Motors. Now, GM is one of the largest auto producers in the world, and essentially what Jeff's saying here is, we know this is a problem. We know that securing these things is very difficult, and they're absolutely taking action to make sure that their cars, if they are connected, are secure. First company we're going to look at here is called Trillium. Trillium is a Japanese company that recently emerged from stealth mode. It was founded in 2014. It's developing products that include lightweight encryption, authentication, cryptographic key management, and something called secure over-the-air software updating technology. And I'll just focus right there on that secure OTA. This is something that is eagerly awaited, these software updates, these over-the-air software updates, but it's something that's been delayed by fears because it essentially opens up connected cars to unauthorized access. Now, Trillium has claimed that it has a product called Security as a Service, and it's these real-time update platforms which can be sold by automakers or insurers to car owners. That technology is supposed to be deployed in beta in 2018, and a full commercialization is expected by 2020. Whether that'll happen is yet to be seen, but it's definitely something to keep an eye out on. They're definitely developing this. The other technology that this company is developing is called Secure CAN. Now, a CAN is CAN, capital CAN. It's a controller area network. Essentially, it's a microcontroller that allows devices to communicate with each other without a host computer, and cars have this. Historically, the automotive industry has said that protecting the CAN is impossible due to the external control unit's limited processing power and limited bandwidth of this in-vehicle network system, but Trillium is addressing that with their technology. Next up, we'll look at Karamba Security. Karamba's software products automatically harden what are called ECUs of connected and autonomous cars, and they prevent hackers from manipulating and compromising those ECUs and hacking into the car. Because these ECUs, these externally connected units, basically operate on one network, which is self-contained inside a vehicle. If hackers can access just one, they can pretty much get to any ECU. Karamba's cybersecurity software also, ensures that there's no false positives when it's tracking different potential threats. And again, this is super important because if you're in a vehicle and you want to do something, or if you're a component of the connected car is trying to execute an operation and it's flagged as a security issue, it needs to be sure that there's actually an issue before it disrupts that action. If it's actually a benign activity, then it needs to flag that as a false positive and not disrupt that, because you're in the vehicle. Every second is critical for whether or not something's going to function correctly or not. Next up, we'll look at an Israeli cybersecurity company called Argus. And Argus is also protecting connected vehicles, but also, they're selling this technology to fleets and different telematics companies. They have collaborations, interestingly, with some of the largest chip manufacturers for the car industry. Those companies include Intel, Qualcomm, NXP, Infineon, and others. And one of this company's main customers is Daimler, so that's pretty significant. Next up, in our cyber defenders categories, we're going to look at critical infrastructure security. Now, these startups are offering cybersecurity for critical infrastructure networks, and especially for industrial control systems. Now, those are systems for which disruption can cause a really debilitating impact on economic security, public health, or safety. What we're talking about here are power plants, electricity grids, hospitals, massive manufacturing facilities, things that are really critical to the functioning of society that are also increasingly coming online. I'll draw your attention here to a quote by Jürgen Stock, and Jürgen is the Secretary General of Interpol, which is an international crime-fighting organization. And he's basically saying here that one attack on a single point of failure in one country could actually have a ripple effect worldwide. And as our cities and infrastructure get more online and as they evolve into the digital age, so do the weapons of our hackers. So this is going to be an increasingly important area that we need to develop security solutions for. The first company on our cyber defenders for critical infrastructure is Nozomi Networks. Basically, Nozomi Networks offers real-time cybersecurity and operational visibility for these industrial control systems. They can build an internal model of an industrial network and the physical processes and uses that happen in that network, again, to establish a behavioral baseline, and then they continuously monitor that baseline to detect changes in the state of the baseline. So the result is essentially a real-time insight into an ICS network, the devices on that network, the processes, and then that enables them to rapidly identify and even remediate attacks, but also process anomalies to tell you if whether or not this industrial control system is working correctly or not. Next up, we're looking at CyberX. And essentially, the CyberX platform is incorporating a patent-pending machine-to-machine behavioral analytics, threat intelligence, identity to identify anomalous behavior in real time. The platform provides a deep network forensics for incident response. It also has a non-invasive risk assessment for top vulnerabilities, such as unpatched ICS devices, as well as unauthorized internet connections and people logging into those control networks that shouldn't be there. That can tell you that. Interestingly, CyberX is also a member of the Israeli National Consortium that was chosen to provide cyber solutions for the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics. Next up, we're looking at a company called Indeji, and Indeji, again, is focused on that real-time situational awareness that's happening inside of the industrial control system to essentially flag those anomalies, go in, identify, and remediate different security issues. Now, our final cyber defenders category is cyber insurance. And these startups, again, are offering products and services for insurance companies to help them quantify cyber risk and negotiate different cyber premiums. Now, here we have just a very small sampling of something that's pretty indicative of this space. It's that it's being increasingly mentioned in the media this year. It's actually something that's been around for a while, but as more of these high-profile attacks happen, people are asking, well, who's going to pay for all this? And there's a number of startups that are emerging to help companies do that. And one of those companies that we really like to highlight is called UpGuard. UpGuard essentially offers what's called C-Star. It's a cybersecurity preparedness score for an enterprise. And this score, it allows businesses and their partners to understand the risk of a breach for an unplanned outage. But it also is applicable for insurance carriers, and it's a new standard by which they can effectively assess client risk and then, build compliance profiles from that. Next up is a company called Cyence. Cyence is really interesting. They've developed what's probably the industry's first economic cyber risk modeling platform. It quantifies cyber risks in both probabilities and dollars. Super important. It's a problem that's been very hard to address. These guys are doing that right now. I'll draw your attention here to that $40 million that they've raised in the Series A round last year. That was one of the largest Series A rounds raised by any tech company last year, according to CB Insights data. Now, the last company in our Cyber Defenders list is BitSight. BitSight has software that culls publicly available data to produce a FICO-like cybersecurity rating. They basically use that numerical score, which ranges from 250 to 900, to vet potential acquisition targets, or allow their customers to vet potential acquisition targets, monitor the risk of breach and data that's shared with vendors and partners, and essentially also to shape the terms of cybersecurity insurance policies. Now, we'll offer a little bit more data on the companies that we just talked about. Here, we can see who the most well-funded cyber defenders are. You can see that SentinelOne, that predictive intelligence company, and Darktrace, an autonomous systems company, are actually the only cyber defenders this year that have raised over $100 million. And of these top 10 most well-funded cyber defenders, you can see that half of the, 5 of these companies are in autonomous systems. And again, these companies are primarily using machine learning and AI. This is a hot topic in cybersecurity. It's increasingly get a lot of funding, as demonstrated by, the half of the cyber defenders that are in that category that are also the top 10 most well-funded. Next up, we can see here the most active VC investors in the Cyber Defenders category. You can see here that Bessemer Venture Partners is actually the only VC to participate in more than 5 deals to these companies since 2012, and no VCs outside this list participated in more than 4 deals to this cohort of companies since 2012. Now here we can see a spread of what's called the Mosaic Money Score. Now, this is a part of CB Insights' proprietary algorithm, which was partially funded by the National Science Foundation when we launched the company. It essentially allows us to assess the health of the company, and this particular score, is based on investor quality, recency of funding, amount of funding raised, in addition to another group of factors. But essentially, the main point here is that this cohort of companies that we've selected have an average Mosaic Money Score of 901, and this is on a scale of 0 to 1,000. The overall cybersecurity average, this is every cybersecurity company in the world that's tracked by CB Insights, they have an average score of 566. So you can tell the companies we selected are in fact these industry leaders, these high momentum emerging companies that are really worth watching. Now, a little bit more on how we selected these companies, but first on how we selected the 9 categories. Essentially, we used that CB Insights Trends tool that we saw twice in this report here, which mines millions of media articles. It helps us quantify attention to tech trends, and we used that to inform our analysis of how we selected those 9 categories that we think are some of the most relevant ones to pay attention to in cybersecurity in 2017. Now, how do we select the 30 companies? We used CB Insights Mosaic Score. Again, this is a score which uses data to track private company health. We use signals that include recency of funding, the total raised, investor quality, like I mentioned, and we gather this data via our machine learning technology, and we put it in what's called the cruncher, and we get a score basically for those companies. And so that's how we selected the 30 in this report. Very data-driven approach. Okay, so now we have a little bit of time here for some Q&A. We'll take some questions from our listeners. Okay, so I'll give you a second to write those in and then do my best to answer them. Let's see. Okay, so here's one coming in. This is interesting. Of all the companies, which is the most interesting to you and why? I mean, that's That's actually it's a good question. We spent a lot of time looking at all these companies, and they're all interesting, and they all offer a unique value proposition sort of across the board in cybersecurity. But again, I think one of the hottest startups in this list, and one that really, if you walk away from this and remember, is Darktrace. I mean, right now they're sort of hitting all the buzz items around machine learning and AI, but even more than that, they've really owned this idea of creating an immune system in your network rather than, or sort of moving past this idea of firewalls and locks on doors to keep people out. So I think really, that's also shown in the fact that they've raised over $100 million. I mean, people are certainly taking note of the fact that this is a company that's going to change the space and that is worth paying attention to. The other thing that's interesting about Darktrace that's notable is that they're not just focusing on enterprise networks. They're focused on the IoT. They have applications across the industrial internet as well. So I think we've really only seen the first iteration of what this company can do. So let's go ahead and take our second question. So of unicorns in cybersecurity, which fall into autonomous systems or predictive intelligence. Okay, so we can go to slide 14, and that's our unicorns slide. And so what we're seeing here is, like I said, Tanium, the most valuable cybersecurity company in the world. They offer a form of natural language processing whereby, someone can, an analyst or a chief information officer can get on a network and basically ask in layman's terms, what's up with all the mobile devices on our network. Obviously that's a bit hyperbole, but essentially you can ask in layman terms to the platform what's happening with your endpoints, and then the software will immediately correlate the data and give you an answer to that. So that's pretty much as close as you can get to a fully autonomous system that can allow analysts to sort of free up their time from focusing on monitoring the entire network and really going into the areas that need more attention very fast. So that's interesting to me. Okta Mobile Security filed for IPO, pretty interesting. Another one on here, actually probably the one that is most interesting to me right now is Cylance. Cylance definitely falls somewhere between autonomous systems and predictive intel. They're using machine learning to automate a lot of the different security things that happen inside a network and then to flag those and tell analysts about them. Company's valued at $1 billion. They emerged last year, like I said. So that's one that's definitely worth keeping an eye on if you're interested in those two areas of the cyber defenders. Actually, I'm being told that is all the time we have for today. Sorry we didn't get to more questions, but please still write those in. Keep them coming. And as always, we'll get to you either via email or if you get at us on Twitter on #CyberDefenders, we'll be sure to make sure we can help out if we can. So thank you again.